Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to a special edition of my favourite 150 films not ranked. This is The Cutting Floor. This was suggested by Chris Mohan. I'll leave a link to his YouTube channel down below, go check out and subscribe. So this is really a few films that in years past, not on YouTube, because I've also been doing this just for 2 years, but in the mists of time when I did my favourite 100 films just in a book with pen and paper, if you remember pen and paper, films that would be on that list but obviously haven't appeared in my top 150 or favourite 150 not ranked videos on YouTube that I've been doing. There are various reasons for this that I will go into. Again, these films are not bad films. Most of these films I still give 5 stars out of 5. But they've maybe just slipped down the list somewhat. Again, I kind of did a top 300 films, a top 400 films. But you have to stop somewhere. Looking at them, the majority of them are American films. There's a couple of filmmakers in it that I'll give reasons for why they perhaps haven't pierced the top 150. And in broad generalistic terms, I think they're films that stereotypically are guys' films. Again, that's generalistic talk. Don't want to get into too much trouble for calling them guys' films. I'm sure there's plenty of women and children that love them too. But in general, that's the kind of films they are. So I don't know whether that says something about me. It says something about what my tastes have become. Because again, you know, if I did a favourite 150 films every year, then obviously the list will change. You'll still have your core films that are your kind of foundational favourite films. But films will drift in and out. So it shouldn't be too long a video, you'll be glad to know. But let's make a start with Goodfellas from 1990, directed by Martin Scorsese. Now, Scorsese, as you may or may not know, used to be like my second favourite filmmaker of all time back in the day. But nowadays, he's probably out of the top 20. He's probably out of the top 25. Just because he's post-2000 films, which I haven't even seen all of them, don't really interest me that much. His reliance on Leonardo DiCaprio is a mystery to me. But Goodfellas, I used to absolutely love. I still obviously like a lot. It's still a very good film. But I think you grow tired of films about gangsters. It is overlong, which is a problem Scorsese would continue to have. You know, I'm a weird person. My favourite Scorsese is still Age of Innocence. I think that's a true masterpiece. But a lot of his quote-unquote masterpieces haven't aged that well, I don't think. But Goodfellas is still a really good film. I love the fact that it has a somewhat subversive ending, as far as, you know, Ray Liotta gets his just desserts, but not really. He gets to rat out all his friends. He doesn't get killed or a huge prison sentence, and then at the end he's complaining because he can't get decent spaghetti sauce. Yeah, Goodfellas is still a very good film, but to be honest, it's not a film I watch that often anymore. But it's still very good. Next is Reservoir Dogs by Tarantino. Tarantino's debut and shortest film, and for me, still my favourite one of his films, and his best film. The Mondo Steelbook. Because he didn't have money, so he couldn't be self-indulgent, as is his main problem, and surrounding himself with yes people who just say he's a genius to him all the time. But again, I think I've kind of went off Tarantino in general. I had such hope for the boy, but his film, I mean, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was really successful critically, and by a lot of people, but for me it was actually quite dull, and I think it's actually his dullest film. And again, his last 4 or 5 films are all like way too long. There's a really good 90-minute film within Tarantino's 2.5 hour or 2 3/4 hour films, and he's just never seemed to realise that. But for me, Reservoir Dogs is his best film because it's short. It's his shortest. It's still probably about 10 minutes too long. He's still a little self-indulgent. And that's why it didn't crack the 150. Next is The Rocky Horror Picture Show by Jim Sharman, starring the wonderful Tim Curry. Again, it's a film that I still love, but it got beat out of the top 150 by Brian De Palma's Phantom of the Paradise. But I still love it. But it just didn't... I could only have room for one wonderful off-the-wall 70s musical. Next, it's Scorsese again, with Taxi Driver, written by Paul Schrader. I mean, sometimes you think of actually more of a Paul Schrader film. It's a Paul Schrader character that he would go on to kind of develop in Light Sleeper and American Gigolo. I do think this is the one Scorsese quote-unquote masterpiece that has aged the best. I don't think Raging Bull's aged that well. Mean Streets certainly hasn't aged that well. There's another Scorsese one coming that I'm just about to mention. But I do think Taxi Driver still stands up, and it's still a very good film. But for me, it's just not in my 150 anymore. Or 100 even. Next is King of Comedy, which is probably my favourite out of the 3 Scorsese films in this little pile. It's a great performance by De Niro and Jerry Lewis. Not Jerry Lee Lewis. It's about fame, and again, it's one of the Scorsese ones. It's underappreciated. It's still probably underappreciated. I'm sure people would kind of rank Taxi Driver and Raging Bull and Mean Streets higher than King of Comedy, but I still think it's actually better than those films. It's got more to say about those films, I think. It's got more to say than those films do. But again, didn't crack the 150, and it certainly used to. Next is Phil Alden Robinson's Field of Dreams, which I still really, really like. It's still an excellent film. James Earl Jones is absolutely fantastic in it. Kevin Costner. It's about that strange relationship men have with their fathers, because there's that barrier and macho nonsense about expressing your feelings. Ray Liotta plays a ghost very well. Burt Lancaster is just wonderful. It's funny, for me the film was emotional because of James Earl Jones and the Burt Lancaster character, rather than the Kevin Costner central relationship with his father. But it's still a very good film, but again doesn't crack the 150 this time. Next is Coppola's Apocalypse Now, which again is still an excellent film. I still haven't watched the final cut, which I picked up on Blu-ray. The original was wonderful. The Redux version was far too long and flabby, so we'll see what the final cut is. It's a bit like Blade Runner. How many times do you need to actually get it right? One of the great war films about the lunacy of war, and it is just a mad film. Hearts of Darkness, the making of, shows you exactly how mad the making of the film was. It's still one of my favourite films. It's just not in the 150. Next is Romero's Dawn of the Dead, which again is about to get a second sight, spectacular 4K Blu-ray release. I believe Elliot Cohen has already got an unboxing video up. I'm not sure how he managed that. Again, wonderful film. For me, my favourite of the Dead trilogy. I know different people have different favourite ones, which is normal. But again, not quite able to make the 150, and before it was kind of an automatic shoe-in. What has happened to me? Next is Dirty Harry. Another wonderful Don Siegel with Andy Robinson, music by Lalo Schifrin. The quintessential tough cop, trying to hunt down the Scorpio killer, obviously loosely based in the Zodiac. Murders in San Francisco in the 70s, or the 60s. Yeah, really good film. The sequel Magnum Force is a lot of fun as well with Hal Holbrook. A man's got to know his limitations. Obviously it was labelled as a fascist, a supporter of totalitarian regimes where the police shoot first and ask questions later. Still very good, but again, just not good enough to make the 150. Again, this is just favourite 150, not the greatest 150. All these films that I'm showing you on the cutting floor, or the cutting room floor, are still very good films. I still like them a lot. The next two are Monty Python films, The Holy Grail and Life of Brian. Both films I absolutely adore. Probably Life of Brian a little bit better, but not by much. Again, these are films that were automatics on my top 100 or top 150. Just not now. But again, still wonderful films. What have the Romans ever done for us? Just not making it this time. Again, somebody out there can build a psychological profile of me to say why, but there you go. Next is The Evil Dead Part 2. Again, for me, the best part of the trilogy. A lot of fun. Essentially, a remake of the first one with slightly more money and a lot more humour. It's a wonderful little film, but again, just not wonderful enough this time. Next is John Ford's Grapes of Wrath with Henry Fonda. Again, I'm not the biggest John Ford fan because of his relationship with John Wayne, but I do love his Henry Fonda collaborations. My Darling Clementine as well. Great film, just not good enough to squeeze in, I'm afraid. The Haunting by Robert Wise. Quintessential film about showing less and meaning more. Wonderful turns by Julia Harris and Claire Bloom, who we all kind of know is a lesbian, but nobody talks about it. Richard Johnson and Russ Tamblyn, bizarrely. The quintessential haunted house film. Just a wonderful, wonderful film, all about atmosphere, all about cinematography, all about weird angles, all about sound design. Just wonderful, but again, just not wonderful enough. The next one is probably controversial, but again, I still love these films. Let me be clear. So it's the films of Tarkovsky. Now, only Ivan's Childhood made it into the top 150, and I know a lot of hardcore Tarkovsky fans are like, "Oh, that's his most commercial. That's his easiest one." It's like, well, that's the one that is more of a favourite to me than the other ones. But again, some of these other ones are masterpieces, but they just haven't made it into my favourite list this time. To be fair, I don't watch Tarkovsky that often. You can tell me how often you watch Tarkovsky. So Andrei Rublev, on many other occasions, this has made my top 100 films. It's one of the greatest films about trying to understand what makes an artist. Just not this time. Mirror is another wonderful film, but again, just didn't make the list this time. Doesn't mean it's a bad film. It's not a bad film. It's still an amazing film. His images... You can watch a Tarkovsky film once in your life and you'll still get images from it popping up in your brain every now and again. Next is Nostalgia. Again, a film that I really like. It has images just that melt your brain. The Sacrifice, probably my least favourite Tarkovsky, but it's still like a 4 out of 5. You know, it's not a bad film. Solaris, again, another excellent Tarkovsky film, but just not a film that I have watched 25 times. Stalker, which probably should have made the list, but again, next year it probably will be. You know, again, just another visual masterwork. But again, this is favourites. I mean, if it was a greatest 150, there'd probably be about 3 of these that would be in it. But it's a favourite, and a lot of things with when you're doing a favourite list, it's about mood, it's how you're feeling at the time. And again, the last film is probably going to be controversial as well, but it's Kubrick's The Shining. Again, this is an excellent film. It's still one of my favourite films. It just didn't make the 150 list. Now, Nazar Prod just did a Halloween video with the Folgers and Ashes guys, Isaac and SGS, which I'll leave a link below, where they talk for an hour and a half about The Shining. Again, I love The Shining. It's a really good film, but it just didn't make my 150 this time. Who knows what will happen next year if I am around to make another video on my top 150. So that just gives you a feel for the films that in the past I have rated really highly, high enough to be in my 150 or 100 as I used to do. But now I just don't feel as strongly for them. I still watch them, I still enjoy them, so that this isn't what this video is about. So please leave your comments below of how foolish I am to leave these films out the top 150, or give me a psychological evaluation of why I've left them out of the 150 and what's wrong with me. And hopefully you'll see me again for more videos. thank you so much for watching this series of my favourite 150 films. I've loved the comments, and please keep commenting on my videos, and hopefully we'll see you again. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying thanks very much.